If you love movies and movie discussions, you've come to the right place. Who am I, you ask? I am The Wiz, and I'm here today with...
Kim Shactman.
Kim, how are we doing today?
Good.
Good.
Yep.
Kim, we are here today to review the 1989 romantic comedy classic When Harry Met Sally, starring Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal, directed by Rob Reiner. You haven't been into films as I have been, so maybe you're not too familiar with the reverence this film does have. But as somebody who really likes romantic comedies, I have been recommending this movie to death for the past 20 years. But
well, it's like a really popular film, isn't it? Like, I used to hear my parents kind of talking about it. Oh, that's a really good movie, and it's just very popular. I just never kind of gave it the time of day. You
know why it is? Because when I started getting into film, I was into art house film, hard stuff, things like that. Even though I definitely had a love for romantic comedies. But it was always older people that would recommend When Harry Met Sally. So when you were younger, when you were in high school, I was like, what do these old people know? And then when
exactly.
Yeah. And then when you realize, no, actually, old people know a lot of stuff because I'm old and I know a lot more than those youngins, goddammit. And that's...
The older, the wiser, right?
Exactly. That's kind of the reason why I never really gave it much thought. But the other thing, and we discussed this too about certain films that I have seen and have not seen, this movie was always available. You can go to a streaming service, or when the rental stores were still around, that was an easy one to rent. So if I really wanted to watch it, I could just pick it up. All right, whatever. I'll watch it. So it was always available. So it would be one of those things. It would be like a constant thing.
So it was put on back burner because you always had it at your fingertips.
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. All right, so why don't we get into it? Let's get into the review of When Harry Met Sally, directed by Rob Reiner. But before we do that, let's get into the plot. It's a simple plot, really. Harry, who is played by Billy Crystal, meets Sally, played by Meg Ryan, for the first time when they're driving 18 hours from their college to New York City, and they essentially have one of the worst times that they could ever have with a person. They hated each other to a certain extent after that ride. But the film goes on to where they have chance encounters throughout the time, and they develop kind of a friendship. And then it goes on from there. Now that we got to the plot, let's get into our 3 points. Kim, why don't we start?
I felt that the film was such a tastefully done romantic comedy. I just felt like it wasn't cheesy. It was a little more realistic, and there's sexual comments in it and things of that nature, but it wasn't derogatory, it wasn't vulgar, it wasn't uncomfortable. I don't know, it was just so tastefully done. And a lot of times, when I'm watching, especially romantic comedies that I've seen come out recently, they're just so over the top cheesy and make me want to throw up in my mouth. And this was just I don't know, it just seemed like such a natural progression in the film of the romantic portion of the story, and then obviously the comedy was just excellent. And I think that kind of bleeds into your first point about the dialogue.
Right.
It was so good.
Yes, I agree with your comment of being tastefully done, not only with the comedy in regards to sex, because this is a sex comedy, even though there isn't a lot of sex in it. There's really not nudity in it.
No, there really isn't.
But you're right. They talk about sex, but in a way that is not gross.
Or uncomfortable, yeah.
Right. I don't mind that type of comedy. I actually kind of like when a comedy is a little vulgar at times, or even very vulgar. It has to be funny. But this movie is funny about sex, but also isn't crass. And a lot of movies that attempt to do that end up being corny, but this isn't. This is very smart. It's hilarious. And I'll get to my point now, which is it has some of the best dialogue in a romantic comedy. I laughed so much throughout this film.
I did too.
And it's Billy Crystal coming up with the joke, and it's Meg Ryan's reaction to it, and it just works so damn well throughout the entire film.
And then even some of the minor characters in the film, their good friends in the film, some of their jokes too that they kind of just toss in there were just hilarious.
Yeah.
How they play off of each other.
Absolutely. The way that specifically Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal feed off of each other, which is going to get into our, I think, second point as well, which we should just dive right into it.
Yeah, because we both completely agree on this point.
So, which is that Crystal and Ryan have excellent chemistry, they are really good together in this movie, and they just flow very well. It almost feels like that they are friends throughout the entire film, like that they just feed off of each other really well. But this is married into the dialogue as well, because the dialogue does an excellent job of flowing the film from when they kind of despise each other to when they're annoyed by each other to them being friends and then beyond. And it's entirely believable. Nothing feels contrived. Nothing feels like it's being forced. It feels
like it's
right.
it's just happening. It's just happening on its own naturally. Yep.
Yes, absolutely. I just love the chemistry of this movie. And again, this is coming from somebody who did not like Meg Ryan at first. Like it's kind of the reason that I kind of ignored the film, because I kept hearing, "Oh, it's so good." Oh, Meg Ryan, really?
Let's shift this. What's your take on Billy Crystal in this film and outside of this film?
Okay, so Billy Crystal as a comedian is good. I think he's funny. I think he is pretty intelligent in that end. Movies, however, he's kind of hit and miss. I mean, I like to Analyze This. I don't know if you remember that movie.
I feel like I've seen it, but I don't remember it.
It's with Robert De Niro, and he plays a mobster who has to get a shrink.
Okay, yeah. All right, that's coming back to me a bit. I think I enjoyed that. It's pretty funny.
And Billy Crystal has done good in some movies too, but like for the most part, I guess when I started watching his films later on, he just had a specific shtick that he'd have that some films it would work, others it did not.
Yeah, I think that's exactly how I feel about him. It's so bad because every time I hear his voice or see him in like a film or somewhere like on the internet or whatever, all I can think of is Monsters, Inc., the Pixar movie, because he played like one of the main characters.
But he's good as Mike Wazowski.
Yeah, that's like all I think about it. And
that's a good one.
But again, like that works for him. Like that's like his niche.
The way that the principal actors work so well together really makes the film really good, because the film is centered all around them.
It's another like semi-performance piece if you think about it. Yeah, I mean, just talking to this, like sometimes when you really enjoy a movie or a film, it's hard sometimes to come up with any additional points, because I don't know about you, but I feel like most humans, like they always are drawn to like focus on the negative first and more. Whereas like when you like really don't have too much, I mean, I really don't have much at all negative to say about this film. Like I just thought it was great.
I'm the same way, but like when it comes to like talking about the negative to the positive, it's really hard to talk about the positive without kind of fanboying out and seeming like you're kind of like, oh my god, and just going nuts like that. So, whereas in the negative, you can get into the details as to exactly why you didn't like certain aspects of something.
Right.
But you're right. I feel the same way, which dives into my third point. Hey. This is one of the best romantic comedies I've seen. Period.
Is it?
Period. Yeah. Let me put my first line from my review that I have right now.
Yes, I want to hear it.
Not since I watched Notting Hill, which is my favorite romantic comedy of all time, have I ever thoroughly enjoyed a rom-com so much.
Wow.
You knowing me and how much I love Notting
Hill. That's like one of your favorites.
Yes. That says something right there.
I was going to say, is it like equal now? Like, or is Notting Hill still the first for you of like romantic comedies?
I have seen Notting Hill about 8 or 9 times. So to even really say, like, if I can make that distinction, that'd be really hard for me to do. I would like to say it's like 1A, 1B for me. But, like, honestly, it's probably 1 and 2. But, man, like, I
want to rewatch this, like, 100 times. Like, I loved it. It was so good.
I'm actually the same way. Like, I think this movie is charming in the right ways, and it's short as well. It's 90 minutes. It's one of the...
I thought for some reason it was going to be like 2 hours, and then I looked, I was like, oh wow, this is good length. Like it wasn't drawn out, stretched out. Like they didn't try to make it longer than what it is just for the sake of making it longer. Like it was just good.
Yeah, it's one of the best cases that I can think of where brevity is something that I think a lot of filmmakers and people who write screenplays really need to hone in. Because there's some that like to get into granular detail about things, and sometimes it works. But other times, it just makes sense to just say, let's cut to the chase. And this is what this movie does. Other movies that would have done this probably would have had other ancillary characters. You would have a subplot line about a specific character for 20 minutes for no apparent reason. No, this
like
movie...
maybe about like in it how they had their friends, like they'd cut to that more, and
Right.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah. The way they did this, though, was really well done. And again, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was such a funny movie, and it was hilarious. And
it was so funny. So funny.
So if I'm comparing it from Notting Hill to When Harry Met Sally, which I think is kind of unfair, I think the romance is better in Notting Hill, but the comedy is so much better in When Harry Met Sally.
Yes. Yeah.
So, like...
That's a good point, yeah. So they're both equally great, just in different ways. You know, a little bit different, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest, like, if I had to choose, I really enjoy Notting Hill, too, but I honestly think I enjoy When Harry Met Sally better.
Okay, well, they're two different films, even though they're both technically rom-coms, but
yeah.
I can understand that. I think the thing is the comedy is more central in When Harry Met Sally than in Notting Hill. Like, the Notting Hill, most of the comedy is towards Spike, and kind of how...
I always forget about him.
Yeah. and kind of how Hugh Grant reacts to everything. That's where the comedy in that movie is. Right. Whereas the comedy is the entire movie.
It just flows through the whole film, yeah.
Absolutely. What is your third point?
My third point is I also feel like the film itself and the story is kind of timeless, if you think about it, because... Like you said, like in the film, with the dialogue and the story, they just cut to the chase. The plot is very simple, so it's simple enough to be timeless. Like you said, this came out in '89, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2024, and I'm watching this for the first time, and I'm like, this is great. You know, like it's just a timeless film, and now I understand why my parents loved it so much. I guess you would need to maybe be a little bit older to appreciate it. Like if I watched this when I was like 15, 16, I'd be like...
Old people talking, ooh.
Yeah, or like, you know, if you're a teenager or something, you'd be like, I'm not in college yet, so like, I don't even know what that half of my life looks like. You know what I mean? Or what the expectation is there. So I guess I can understand how it may be a little boring for some at that age, but I could watch this in another 10 years and be like, oh, I still really love this movie. It's timeless.
Even though it is old, it really speaks to something that I think everyone goes through. Maybe not the whole plot line of you hate somebody and then you become friends with somebody in that aspect and then you fall in love with them and da-da-da. But like the conversations that are had, the things that are discussed, the things that people go through, especially with
the breakups, the divorce, the being single, trying to find somebody, feeling like, you know, oh, I have to get married by a certain age because everybody else is doing it, or like, it's interesting that a lot of times that doesn't change in our society.
Right.
I mean, it may shift a little, it may change a little, but overall, that's a lot of just how relationships work or don't work, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I even love like the snippets they put in with the, you know, older folks about their relationships.
I did too, but then didn't it also just pretty much telegraph the fact that they were going to get together in the end?
Kinda.
It's not that big of a deal. But like I kept watching it and go, oh, it's obvious they're going to get together. So you wouldn't have all these...
Right, because they basically like preface that with those... Yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't mind them. I actually think they're good too. But I kind of, as the film was going on, it was like, well, it's kind of obvious they're going to get together at this point. So... Yeah. But anyway, the way that it...
But it doesn't ruin it at all. It's fine.
I don't think it does either.
It's like, whatever.
Nope.
Yeah.
Not at all. So. All right, Kim, so who do you recommend this for?
I recommend this for those that enjoy, like, a feel-real romantic comedy. So not super cheesy, not overly done. Like, the story feels so real, and the characters feel so real. And like you said, the dialogue... Whereas, as I mentioned before, I feel like a lot of times, like, I'll watch romantic comedies that are newer out today, and it's just so corny and cheesy, and I'm like, come on, like, this is like a Hallmark movie, you know? Yeah. And like, but with this, it's just a feel-real romantic comedy. And then I also recommend it for people who may enjoy films about fate or coincidence, right? Because throughout the film, they run into each other, and then that's how they kind of realize, oh, like, I should be friends with this person because, you know, I keep running into them and this and that. And again, as we were talking about, like, the older couples that jump on screen, like, I like it because it also goes over kind of how other people's fates and coincidences play within their relationship to show that this can happen to anybody. And I really like that. And I mean, I don't just recommend it to those type of people. I just think they would enjoy it even more. I really think like anyone could watch this film and enjoy it. I'm thinking, and I'm like, I mean, again, unless you're like a teenager or like a young adult, you know, unless you're like a film buff, like maybe you were at that time, I think you may think it's a little bit boring and be like, okay, whatever, old people. But overall, like, anyone can really watch this film and enjoy it. Yeah.
And who do you not recommend this for?
My non-recommendation is very similar to yours. So basically, if you enjoy more of like a love at first sight romantic comedy, because that's not what this is. This is a gradual build up, or like you mentioned at the beginning, they kind of hated each other, and they kind of mentioned that a couple times throughout the film, that they hated each other at the beginning, and then it's a gradual build up and into friendship and then beyond. So it's not like a quick romantic love. It's took a little bit more time to get there, but in a great way.
I agree, since it was my point. Okay, kidding.
Screw you. So for listeners, for those of you that don't know, Wiz and I actually have like a little online notebook, and we write down our 3 points because we're getting old and we can't remember shit. And we write down, and I can see his and he can see mine. And a lot of times I'm always last minute writing up my points because I'm like Miss Popular. I'm so super busy.
Yeah, you're busy. Come on.
And and he always writes his down first. And then I'm usually like scrambling to write mine before we meet and do our recording. And a lot of times I'm taking some of his stuff and reusing and repurposing because it's good shit.
Yeah.
He's got some good shit. And he's like, oh, I'm so brilliant.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, fuck you.
I is so smart.
Yeah. He's like, finally, you understand how brilliant I am. Oh my God, please. I'm like, well, you do have some good points.
That's what matters.
Oh my God. Screw you.
All right.
All right. What about you? Who do you recommend this fantastic film
Okay,
for?
so I recommend this for people if you like a sex comedy that isn't vulgar. I really want to hammer that point in because this is a rated R movie. They talk about sex.
Yes, I noticed that too. I was like, oh wow, this is rated R, but like you don't see any skin.
But like they talk very frank about sex, and I think that's what made it a rated R movie. But like it's not vulgar. It's something that honestly, if I were to watch this with my parents, I don't think I would be that embarrassed by.
No.
Except maybe the world famous orgasm scene.
The scene in the restaurant, I was like, oh my God, she is not going to do this right now. And I was like, this is great. This is great.
I gotta be honest with you though, that scene didn't work as well with me, but I think it's more because when I went to see a movie in the theater, they would have the interstitial kind of, thank you for coming to the theater. And then this scene would always be there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it would always be there. It would have scenes from Gilda, Citizen Kane, and the final scene would always be this specific scene. So I've seen this scene thousands of times. But this is the first time I've seen it in context during the movie. And
I had never seen it.
Yeah, it's funny, but I'm like, yeah, I remember that.
Oh my God, I thought it was so funny.
It was.
The look on Billy Crystal's face.
Like, yeah, okay, you made your point.
He's like, yep. And she was so good about it too. I'm like, wow.
All right, and I also recommend this for people if you prefer the friends to lovers plotline, which I think is the key thing to this movie when it came to the plot.
Yeah.
Like, if you are not a type of person that wants this type of plotline, I would say, I guess, don't go for it. But it's really one of the greatest strengths of this movie is that how that plotline works and how it flows so well and is believable throughout. So,
but the nice thing is I feel like some plot lines that have that, they draw it out a little bit longer.
Oh, yeah.
And there's not as much humor in it. Some people may get bored with that standard plot line, whereas if they watched it in When Harry Met Sally, they may be able to like enjoy it a little bit more or tolerate it because it's not drawn out. There's so much humor in it that you almost don't really realize it's happening until it is, right?
Yeah, like Friends, like the TV series Friends, did it for like 10 freaking seasons, for God's sake.
Exactly.
Like,
hence the name of the show.
Yeah. So, again, brevity is probably the greatest strength of this movie. Who do I not recommend this for? Like you said...
I already stole your point.
Yeah, well, it happened. I do not recommend this for people if you are more into the love at first sight romantic films, that they make in this type. This is definitely not one of those films. Like we mentioned, they hate each other in the beginning, but I think that's to its greatest strength, where instead of like the love at first sight kind of model. Now, some movies do work with that and do very well with that type of romance element, but if that's what the kind of movie you like, maybe not for you, but I would still say check it out, to be absolutely honest.
Yeah, like, I mean, wouldn't you still kind of like I said, like recommend this to anyone? Like, I feel like it's so good.
Well, now that we're here, yes, I would say I would recommend it to anybody.
Yes, Wiz, do you recommend this film?
Yeah, God, man.
I'm just breezing right through it. I'm like,
yeah,
it's
Kim.
It's now the Kim Shactman show.
Yeah, exactly. Get off my podcast. What, Kim?
God
Why?
Damn it, you're just a guest. Yes, I would highly recommend this film.
I'm the same way.
Just like the last, what was it? The Holdovers we watched?
Yeah.
I highly recommended that one too, which is funny. So my brother-in-law is visiting, sorry to get off topic, but my brother-in-law is visiting this weekend. Mm-hmm. And do you know what he said to me? We were talking about movies and, TV shows. And, when you talk to people, you're like, oh, what do you watch? What are you currently watching? And he's like, I saw the best film the other day. I'm like, what was it? He's like, The Holdovers. And I'm like, I know, I just did a podcast on it. I was like, it was so good. But anyway, sorry, I digress. But yes, just like The Holdovers, I highly recommend.
This is a really
When Harry Met Sally.
Yeah, this is a really good movie. Again, I said my third point. One of the best romantic comedies I've ever seen. I now understand why people love this movie so much.
Me too, yeah.
And it's hilarious. The romance is believable, but it's not as potent as I would think with most movies that are romantic comedies. But just the hilariousness and the charm.
But the chemistry brings it home. It brings the romance home. And that's,
Yes. As a romantic comedy, this is absolutely one of the best that I've ever seen. It's a fantastic
Yay!
Yeah, absolutely. So we both recommend from When Harry Met Sally?
Yeah. Oh, yes, most definitely.
Absolutely. Definitely see it if you haven't, but honestly, you probably have.
Yeah. We're like the last people in the world that haven't seen it.
Probably, yeah. Now, if you want my full review on this movie, you can go to my website at IamTheWiz.com. You'll have my full written review right on the site, along with a link to the video that has this review that you just listened to. Thank you for listening to this review. If you want to know what we're reviewing in the next couple days, you can look on the screen right now to see what's coming up next. If you like what you heard, go ahead and leave a like on this video. If you want to discuss your opinion on the film or the review itself, please leave a comment. And if you want to hear more, subscribe to the channel. Thank you again for listening. I will talk to you next time.